I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the News du Jour, a calmer space to consume the news. So today is the last day of our Black Friday sale, and you guys can check out with a 20% off code, and the code is Grateful for You 20, all caps. So if you would like to purchase our merchandise for 20% off, today is the day. Go get it. So I just wanted to let you guys know here at the top of the episode that early voting has started in Georgia for the Walker-Warnock runoff. And we've covered this race before in a lot of different capacities. If you guys remember, Walker is the guy who, is anti-abortion. And then it came out that he probably paid for one, if not more than one woman's abortions, his former partner's abortions. So he is running against Senator Warnock, and this runoff is set to conclude on December 6th. So we'll have the answers and, the results then, but the early voting has begun already. So stay tuned when it comes to that last outstanding Senate race. And then for our first story today, I do have to issue a content warning here. This story does involve anti-Semitic rhetoric. So for our first story today, we are discussing Kanye West running for president in 2024. So Kanye West, amid all the other news about him, has now announced a bid for president in 2024. This should be pretty alarming to everyone, seeing as this man has recently come out as a strong anti-Semite, and he's been pretty much dropped by everyone for it, from his agent to his bankers to his brand collaborators, everyone. His first presidential run was back in 2020, if you guys remember, where he failed to register for the ballot in all 50 states and garnered only about 70,000 votes. If you guys remember, he held an emotional rally in South Carolina where he confessed he had initially wanted to abort his daughter when she was in utero. And this is something that he told the whole country, pretty much the whole world, and it's going to live on forever and be something that she could potentially see one day. But the strangest thing about this presidential race so far has been that he's been seen visiting President Trump at Mar-a-Lago alongside other prominent anti-Semite Nick Fuentes. Nick is also known for extreme misogyny and fascism on top of severe racism. Kanye did what he called a Mar-a-Lago debrief, quote unquote, on his Twitter account in the form of a video where he claimed that he had actually asked Trump to be his vice president. He claimed that he asked Trump why he hasn't tried to free the January 6th convicts. And he claimed that Trump insulted Kim Kardashian, the mother of his children. It also seems that Kanye has hired a British anti-Semite named Milo Yiannopoulos as his campaign manager. This man reportedly donated $14.88 to a Jewish writer one time, referencing a white supremacist manifesto called 14 Words and 88, which stood for Heil Hitler during the Nazi reign. So things are getting pretty ugly here. And with Kanye back on Twitter, and seemingly having free reign to say whatever hateful things he wants, this stands to elevate anti-Semitic rhetoric globally and is extremely toxic and dangerous. So this is just something that we wanted to raise the red flag on here on the news du jour. It's something we should all pay attention to and be sure to be denouncing as it moves forward, because this is headed in a really bad direction. And then for our next few stories, we are actually going to be covering different riots and protests going on all over the world. First up, the World Cup riots. So riots have reportedly broken out in several Belgian and Dutch cities after Morocco's 2-0 win over the Belgian team this past Sunday. Police actually had to use tear gas. People were jailed and injured in the process. But there was also a ton of destruction left behind as well, like scooters set on fire, cars hit with bricks and even overturned, and tons of debris just left all over the streets. It's really hard to imagine people being this upset over sports, but soccer fans are really unlike any other. But this type of protest is much less serious and honestly much more annoying than the other protests we do have to discuss today. The next set of protests is taking place in China. And again, this is much more serious. There have been a number of things setting off these protests in China, from a factory fire that killed 38 people, to an apartment fire that killed 10 people, to the president's zero COVID policy that kind of affected all of this. It requires people to stay in lockdown in the event that even one case of COVID shows up. It's just been a lot for everyone. And these protests, they dug up all of this suppressed anger from everyone in the country on a range of topics. And like a wildfire, the protests spread throughout the nation of repressed peoples. Protesters are commonly carrying in China white sheets of paper to represent the traditional funeral cover of China, white. Protesters chanted, "We want freedom," which is really telling. They did not reference one event. They simply don't feel free. Now, protesters can be jailed in China without much reasoning. So this is a very bold move. And as we know, these protests are also happening in Russia and Iran, and many people around the world are crying right now for freedom. So that takes us to the protests in Iran. So many are considering these protests to be make or break for the people of Iran, as we've discussed so many times. And if you don't know about them, definitely listen to our special bonus episode where we interview Elika Laban, a Iranian lawyer, on this topic. But the UN met to hear from eyewitnesses and victims, and a heartbreaking letter was sent to the government from a father of a prominent prisoner. But we're going to cover all of that in depth tomorrow, first thing on the episode, because there's just a lot to unpack. But I wanted to let you guys know the protests are still ongoing and there has been a UN meeting about this. So this is some movement. And again, we'll dive deep into all of that tomorrow. And that is the news du jour. Today, I wanted to leave you guys with the quote, "A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on." If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use to listen. A rate and review or shout out on social media would mean the world to us and help us be able to keep creating the news du jour. But the best way to support all of our work is to become a patron at www.patreon.com/sugarfree media. You can also follow us on social media under sugarfreemedia.co on Instagram and just sugarfreemedia, all one word, on TikTok. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from Oklahoma.